Hey there, you're in the writing shed with Dani Pescuma. So grab a cuppa, settle down, and let's begin. It's Tuesday again, and today I want to take you somewhere for a moment. I am 18 years old, and I'm sitting at the desk in my bedroom, which is very chaotic and has several photographs of actors I was deeply in love with on the walls, like my secret crushes and not so secret. I will say no more. And I'm writing a letter, an actual letter, in my best handwriting, on actual letter paper, to a girl called Chris, who lives in Austria. At least I imagine she still does, and who I have never met. I had found her name through a penpal exchange that my cousins introduced to me. We had traded one letter, then two, then three, and now, every few weeks, an envelope with an Austrian stamp and a handwriting that I recognized straight away. And sometimes the envelope was really big. I loved the A4 envelopes with brochures of holidays in the area where she lived. I can only explain the feeling of being chosen as a friend that had never seen me, of mattering to someone who had no obligation to think about me at all. And I think that that's what a letter does. And this is what this episode is about. So, Chris and I wrote to each other for about 3 years, I think. We wrote about school. We were both about to go into universities, about the boys we liked and the ones who didn't notice us. I remember at one point in our friendship, I had a boyfriend and she also had a boyfriend, and we talked about them and how to deal in different kinds of situations in a relationships. And we also talked about the films we had seen and the music we were obsessed with. We told each other about our families, the bits we were proud of and the bits that really confused us. We wrote about what we wanted our lives to look like when we were grown up, and which at 18, we were kind of on that in between of not knowing for sure, but having to choose anyway, which was thrilling, exciting, but also really scary. What strikes me now, looking back, is how much I told Chris that I told almost no one else. I think that part of it was the distance. She couldn't tell anyone I knew, for starters, and I think that part of it was also the medium, because when you write a letter, you have time to think. You start it and then you go on and do something else, and then you come back to it. You write a little bit more, and then if you don't have time to finish, you just leave it for a while again. And you have that space in between the thought and the word, and you can say things that feel impossible to say out loud, because by the time they reach the other person, so many things have happened, or you are somewhere else entirely. So it's kind of like the letter travels without you. There is a courage that lives in letters that I don't think quite exists anywhere else. So Chris and I lost touch eventually, as pen pals do. Life got much faster, then email arrived, and that slow waiting rhythm of a letter, the writing, the posting, the collating things to send within the envelope, the watching for the reply, the waiting for when is it going to arrive. I think it felt out of step with everything else. But I never forgot what it felt like to write those letters. And more than that, I've never forgotten what it felt like to wait for one. And I think that in a world that nearly everything is so immediate, there is something about waiting for a letter that is almost entirely absent from modern life. That slow, pleasant anticipation, that knowledge that somewhere someone is thinking about you carefully enough to put their thoughts in an envelope along with photos, with newspaper cuts and magazine pages that were ripped off their original place and send them across the world with your name on the front. We have, unfortunately, traded that waiting for immediacy. And of course, I know, I understand, I agree, we have gained so much. But I think that we have also lost something. A quality of attention, a particular depth of relationship, a feeling of being worth someone's unhurried time. And my gosh, unhurried time nowadays is like Bitcoin, isn't it? It's so valuable, and you still can't see it, you can't touch it, and it seems like we have so little of it. And I really want to make the case today that slow letters changed how I see the world. At one point I had 4 different pen pals. Chris from Austria, I had one from Scotland, one from Egypt, and another one from Spain, I think? I'm not so sure. But because the form was different, and because something about the ceremony of a letter, like you can choose the paper you write on and the pen, and the deliberate choosing of words asks more of us than dashing something off on a screen or on a text, on a WhatsApp message on the phone. Writing a letter, replying to a letter asks us to be present, to really think about it, to mean what we write and what we say, what we put on paper. So when I grew up, a few years after I started university and everything and finished university, I decided to start writing letters again, proper ones, in an envelope with a stamp, with a beautiful paper. So I wrote to friends I hadn't spoken to in too long. I wrote to my cousins who live far away and who I missed so much at the time, I still do. And I once wrote to a woman I had met briefly at an event, but whose conversation had stayed with me and who I wanted to tell that. And I wrote to a woman, I stayed in her house when I went to Germany and for a pilgrimage. And I need to say, that's also how I met my husband 21 years ago through a pen pal website. So the responses I got from these letters, they were extraordinary, and not because of what people wrote back. Of course, they were wonderful, especially what my husband used to write back to me. But because of what people said when they next saw me or called me. They said things like, "Oh, I couldn't believe it when I saw the handwriting on the envelope. I stood in the hallway and I read it twice before I even took my coat off." And that's really not happens with a text. You get that on your phone, and sometimes if you were free, you were going to go and look and read and reply straight away. If not, it will take a day or 2 or hours. But with the letters, I thought, this is the thing. This is what we've lost. Not just the writing itself, but the receiving, I think, mainly. And the moment of being held at a distance in someone else's careful attention. I love letters, don't you? So letters have always been, for me, where the truest things get said. If you think about literature and women in literature, for example, Jane Austen wrote letters to her sister Cassandra that were so frank, so funny, so full of feeling that Cassandra burned most of them after Jane's death. We will never know what they said. That loss, those inked pages, those truths, that loss is one of literary history's great sorrows. Another example. Vita Sackville-West and Virginia Woolf wrote to each other for decades. Their letters were passionate, literary, searching even. They wrote about books, about love, about the peculiar difficulty of being a creative woman in a world that kept asking you to be something smaller. These letters survived, and how fun, how cool it is that we can read them and something in them still lives, something urgent and alive and deeply human, long after the women who wrote them are gone. Think about that. What a treasure that is. Because I think about that sometimes when I sit down to write a letter. I think about that what I'm doing is very old, but at the same time it's very human and not, in fact, lost, only waiting to be remembered. Here's what I want to say to you. You don't need a penpal exchange or foreign stamp or fancy writing set. All you need is a piece of paper and something to say. Simple. A piece of paper. It can be a notebook. Or, I don't know, I have loads of notebooks, but I have a little block of notes here, a little pad. Some dog wants to go out. All you need is just a piece of paper and something to say. So think about the last conversation you had that you came away from thinking, I didn't quite say what I meant. Or the person you've been meaning to thank for something for months. Or that friend who is going through something really hard and who you want to really reach in a way that a WhatsApp message doesn't quite achieve. Write them a letter. It doesn't have to be a long one. 1 page is enough. I mean, gosh, half a page is enough. The point here is not really the length. The point is the slowness, the unhurry, the intention. The fact that you stopped and thought and chose your words and sent them forward with your name on them. So here is your writing invitation for this week. Think of one person, one, who deserves a slow letter. And then write them 1 sentence, just one. The opening line of a letter you haven't written yet. And then you can stop there if you want, or you can keep going. You can send it or not send it. But write that first line. Because the first line is the door. And once the door is open, you may be surprised where it leads. For me, it led me to the altar. We're going to the chapel. So what you can write, for example, is just start with, I have been thinking about the time we, or something like that. There's something I never told you and I've been meaning to. Or, I know it's been a long time, but I really wanted you to know. So 1 sentence, that's all. And if you love the idea of writing like this, slowly, thoughtful, with a quiet prompt waiting for you each morning, in the Writing Shed Club, you will find exactly that. Every day, a short note, or a prompt, or a thought will land inside the club. It could be for a fiction writing time, or it could be for your own inner world, because I love journaling as well. I will leave the link to the club in the show notes. And that's all from the shed for today. Like I always say, take whatever stayed with you. A thought, a feeling, a single line, and let it land somewhere. Your notebook's waiting. And I would love if you could share this podcast to someone you know that loves writing letters and that you miss. And why not start writing to each other again? So, until next Tuesday, keep writing, keep imagining, and remember, somewhere between your imagination and the page, something wonderful is waiting. I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye!